Hello, my name is Jay Newland, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as the president of the Concord Players. Welcome, and thank you for joining us in our event today. As some of you may know, the Players can trace its roots back to 1857, when Louisa May Alcott and her sister Anna founded the Concord Dramatic Union. The union became the Concord Dramatic Club, which ultimately in 1919 became the Concord Players. So we've celebrated not only 100 years of residence here at 51 Walden, but also our 100th anniversary. In honor of our patron saint, the Players has produced an adaptation of Little Women every 10 years since 1932, so I hope to see you here very soon. The Concord Players is very proud of its continuous record of providing quality theater to the citizens of Concord and the surrounding areas. We produce 3 award-winning productions each season, and through our Concord Traveling Troupe, numerous performances at local nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Each summer, on the lawn of the Concord Public Library, our All the Worlds of Play stage players present the works of William Shakespeare, and we provide material support to the fully productionized and costume productions of Opera 51. Unfortunately, since March of 2020, like all other theaters, we've been dark and unable to provide live theater to the public. Unfortunately, our expenses are still high as we continue to maintain the facility here at 51 Walden, which was listed on the National Registry of Historic Buildings in 2007, and are actually facing a significant deficit in the tens of thousands of dollars, which is why I'm here, to ask for your financial support so we can continue the legacy that Louisa May Alcott started so many years ago, and to continue to provide quality theater, which brings our community together in experiencing shared feelings of drama, tragedy, joy, laughter. As an integral part of the vibrant Concord arts scene, our nonprofit status means your donation is tax deductible. Please go to our website, concordplayers.org. Click on the donate button and see how you can help us. I appreciate any assistance you can provide, and thank you for your contribution. We miss you all very much and can't wait to see you at the theater.
Something has changed within me. Something is not the same. I'm through with playing by the rules of someone else's game. Too late for second guessing. Too late to go back to sleep. It's time to trust my instincts. Close my eyes.
What I love about Wicked is it takes this classic film, The Wizard of Oz, that everybody in the world knows, everybody in the world loves, and it builds upon it in a really cool way.
Then suddenly I'm here, respected, worshipped even, just because the folks of Oz needed someone to believe in.
Are people born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? And I think the truth is we live in a world where it's so easy to be judgmental and criticize someone.
I'll help you be popular. You'll hang with the right cohorts. You'll be good at sports. Know the slang you've got to know. So let's start, because you've got an awfully long way to go.
And we place a judgment on them without considering that there may be outside factors in their life, things that have happened to them that have molded and shaped them as a person.
They want you to become less callow, less shallow. But I see why invite stressing. Stop studying strife and learn to live the unexamined life.
Wicked was the first show I saw that I had this is Broadway moment. It's just the most stunningly beautiful show about fitting in, loving each other, loving others, showing support for others. And it's just in this magical world combined with this story we already know and love, just with a little bit of a twist.
Hello and welcome to Concord Player's 100th anniversary event, Spellbound, a conversation with Gregory Maguire. My name is Lisa Asbury, and we wish you could be with us in person, but we want you to all stay safe and healthy so that you can join us back at 51 Walden when we have our next performance. Theater is magic, and although our stage has been dark for several months, it brings us enchantment and an added glimmer today with our invited guest. Gregory Maguire is a writer of prodigious talent with an unparalleled depth of understanding into the human spirit. His novel Wicked became a blockbuster Broadway musical, familiar to all, and his writing proves that an extraordinary imagination combined with an utmost divine gift for words can have a powerful and positive impact on the world. So welcome, Gregory, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for welcoming me into, well, I don't know where we are, but I like it.
I like to think this is Elphaba's tea room. You know?
Well, that's very good. And of course, you'd have to serve green tea. I'm sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. As you can imagine, that is a theater company. The Concord Players has been enchanted with your work for years. Before we begin, I would like to read something from a review of your latest book that I read the other day. A Wild Winter Swan is a fairy tale stretched and reshaped into a 20th century American tale about immigration, success, family, and growth. So my first question to you about this book is, can you give our audience a glimpse into this book and the inspiration behind it?
Yes, I can. A Wild Winter Swan takes as its données, if you will, Hans Christian Andersen's story called The Wild Swans. It's not one of his better known stories, but it ends with an image that nobody who's ever read it can forget, which is the 11th brother out of 11 brothers, I believe, having been magicked into being a swan, has been caught halfway in his rescue. So while his sister has been able to weave 10.5 magic shirts to save her 11 swan brothers, she hasn't finished the last sleeve for the last brother. And so when she rescues him, he is left with one swan wing on a human form. A Wild Winter Swan is a story set at Christmas time in 1962 in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, when this character out of a fairy tale improbably blows onto the mansard roof of a 17-year-old Italian girl who is living with her grandparents in somewhat punishing conditions, let's say, even though it's the Upper East Side.
Yeah, cool. So you have mentioned in other interviews that I've watched your strict childhood with your parenting, with your parents, and as a means of escaping into the world of books and make-believe. That was kind of your thing, a lot like mine, because I used to have a special place that I would go to in the middle of a lilac tree to read. So I was wondering,
Wow.
Did you as a child have a secret place or a place that no one knew that you could go and either make believe or write a story or dream about reading something someday?
Well, up until the time that I was, say, in 4th grade, there was no secret place because we were a family of 9 living in a railroad flat. In fact, the open door of the book was itself the secret door to a private place.
Okay.
And that's part of the allure of reading, is that when you open a book, you can simultaneously be as alone as it is possible to be, even in Grand Central Station, or you can be as in full communion with everybody who has ever read that book, with the author who has put it together, with everybody even who may read it at some time in the future. So that was my secret alone place up until I was in 4th grade. Now, when my family became a little bit more fiscally stable and we moved to a better neighborhood, the public library was within walking distance.
Oh, nice.
It hadn't been previous. And so the library itself was a temple and a museum and a kind of charged Merlin's cabin of all sorts of possibilities. And again, you walked in there, you recognized the librarians. There was one who always leaned on her knuckles, and she chewed gum, and she snapped the rubber bands at the edge of her thing, and she chonked those library slips with that stamp. It was so
Yeah,
vicious.
I know, they
She was
both-
furious. And I thought, well, I would be furious too if I was paid by the pennies and nickels that came from kids in 3rd grade giving their library fines in. She must really love books. She can live on that kind of salary.
Absolutely.
So a library, I think, is a secret place for many.
Yeah.
Perhaps not as often now as it was when you and I were young, but still, it's there for those who need it.
Yeah, yeah. When reading about your childhood, you were the director amongst your siblings, correct? When you had your stories and you would morph them into different, scenarios. So, did you ever have the urge to be an actor or a director? And if so, what character role would you want to play or direct?
That's an extremely complicated question. And I will say I didn't really understand what direction meant when I was organizing games in the backyard. But I think for any group of kids, whether they be a large group of siblings, as we were, or several large groups of siblings that all play together, inevitably there's one kid who ends up being what I call the boss kid. And the boss kid is the one with the ideas. The boss kid is the one who develops the big voice and says, people, we're going to do this now, and tells people what the program is for the day. So I did not see myself as a performer, although I did take stock roles in any impromptu organized play that I devised. But I did like to call the shots and say, all right, over here, see this stand of brooms, that's going to be the tornado, because look at that twisty stick. And that can be, so when we have the tornado scene, you come over here and pretend to go around that twisty stick. And over there, that table, that can be the Wicked Witch of the West. That can be Dorothy's house. So stick your feet under the table, and that can be where the house, you just make up with whatever you have at hand.
Right.
That's what play is. When I got to high school and I found I could sing, I really wanted to be in the high school musicals. But I couldn't afford to, because even in high school, I needed to work to make money. And I couldn't take 10 weeks for rehearsals every day after school. I had to go to my job. 1 year, and this was just like a movie. 1 year, when I was a senior, the high school show that year was Little Mary Sunshine. I don't know if you know that show.
Yes, I do.
Well, it was about 7 days from opening night, and the person playing the fifth business in that show, Uncle Oscar, I think was his name. Well, the kid playing Uncle Oscar, who had a great voice, couldn't learn the lines. He had to drop out at a moment's notice. And the director applied himself to me and said, please, everybody knows you can sing, and you're smart enough to learn the lines fast. So I stepped in with very little rehearsal and pulled it off magnificently, I might add.
That's great.
And I would have liked to do acting and singing in college, but I sang in college in a different way. I also worked my way through college by being a cantor in a church and a music director. So I did that instead of being on the stage. But a lot of people would say the altar and the stage, there's not too much difference. And the way I did it, it wasn't either.
Well, this year is the anniversary, the 25th anniversary, correct, of Wicked. And I reread Wicked this summer because I've read it 3 or 4 times.
Oh, my.
But I couldn't help but see some very stark and similar turmoil we're experiencing now in the U.S. And I wonder how you observe the times we're living in now, and if you find Wicked's characters, plot, and politics to align with our current state of affairs.
Well, I'll tell Lisa, that's a great question. When I wrote the book in 92, 93, it was published in 95, I thought to myself, this book is a throwback book. It takes political crises and tensions that we've more or less outgrown, and for anybody who wants to read this book, they will be able to breathe a sigh of relief that I'm talking about something that sounds old-fashioned. That's how I felt about it at the time, and indeed it did seem like a late 19th century, early 20th century book, the metes and bounds of which could not have gone much beyond, say, 1930, let's say, or let's say 38 because of MGM.
Right.
But then it was published, and it had a slow but very steady build, and it was almost immediately interest was expressed about it being first a movie and then a play. When it was being developed as a play, it was going pretty gangbusters, and I was starting to get excited about, even if it only ran for a week, it would be fun to see it run for a week. And then September 11th, 2001 happened. And I thought to myself, who in the world is going to want to watch a play that asks us to be cautious about who we name as our enemies? Because the faster we throw those words around, the more likely we are of doing real harm, and the more likely we are of slipping into the mistake of demeaning somebody's humanity in order to give ourselves courage to be menacing and vicious and murderous. I thought, this is not the time for Wicked. What a shame. I mean, of course, everybody's hearts and minds and spirits were attached to all those who had died in that terrible disaster. But I did think, well, that will, as Alan Bennett would say, that puts paid to this project. Lo and behold, Wicked continued, and it opened, and instead of it being not the right thing, it seemed to be exactly the right thing. It was a message that continued to need to be heard, perhaps especially because suddenly our sense of our clannishness, our us versus them, began to be more pronounced. And in the years since Wicked opened on Broadway, which is 16 years, I think this would have been the 17th year if it was running this year, it has only become more pertinent. What a sad truth.
It is sad.
It is.
Yes.
That we have done some backwards evolution, I'm afraid, and I hope it can be turned around. I hope we can remember that more unites us than divides us. But sometimes it takes story to remind us. We have to work at that
Exactly.
in order to get it.
Right. So I read Wicked years ago when my sister passed it on to me, because she was like, this is the perfect book for you. I love fantasy and fiction, and I was hooked ever since then. When the musical came a few years later, did you look at the musical as a true representative of the book? And if you, when the musical began, what kind of process did you have, or say did you have? Were you against anything in particular that they were wanting to do, or did you have priorities that you wanted to see happen when they made it into a musical?
Well, that's several questions, and I'll answer the second one first, which is that because the rights to the novel rested solely with me, I had the authority to set the terms of any contract with any movie production company, with any theater, and I decided for myself that if this story had the chance of being successful on stage, it would have to be because I stepped back and let the professionals do their jobs. Now, I didn't have to agree to let it happen at all, and my agreeing to let it happen at all makes a funny story, at least funny to me. Stephen Schwartz, the composer of Wicked, found out that the play had been optioned in Hollywood, and found out that nobody in Hollywood was really being very happy with the scripts that were being delivered the play, for the movie. He went to Hollywood and he knocked on the door of the director, Mark Platt, of the film, and he said, or the producer, I mean, and he said, "Mark, I'm Stephen Schwartz," and Mark said, "Yeah, I know," and Stephen said, "The scuttlebutt in Hollywood is that nobody's really very happy with the shooting script you've got, and I think I know why." And Mark said, "Oh, you do? Do you? Well, what?" And Stephen said, "Ever since 1938, people know all over the world that people in Oz sing. You need to get these people singing in this story first."
And
One-
Elphaba sings
and
in your
Elphaba
book.
sings in the novel 3
Right.
times.
Yes,
she
that's
sings.
right.
I made sure to give her a singing voice for exactly that reason.
Mm-hmm.
That it was important that even if nobody ever gave her a mic, she still had a
Mm-hmm.
voice. So Mark Platt said, "Well, that's very interesting, and I kind of get your point." And Stephen said, "Give me the rights. I'll make it into a Broadway show, and then you can film it." And Mark said, "Works for me. I've always wanted to do a play on Broadway, and I get that, but you're going to have to persuade Gregory because he has all the rights." So Stephen Schwartz's people called up my people, and we eventually talked on the phone. Stephen said, "I'm Stephen Schwartz," and I said, "Yes, I know who you are. You know, thank you." And we met at an undisclosed location in Connecticut. We went for a walk, and Stephen said, "I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why I think, even though the sales price of your book is like $1 million, and Broadway doesn't have that kind of money, I still think it would make a better play than a movie right now, and here's why." And he said, "A close-up of Elphaba, the green-skinned witch, will make everybody turn sick because she's so green, and so you want to avoid that." And I thought, yeah. Next.
Yeah.
And he said, "Your book is full of 19th century emotions, big pre-Freudian moral discussion, and therefore when a character comes on stage and begins to sing what's in his or her heart, especially her heart, they will catch everybody in the audience in the palm of their hand, even if the stage is filled with lots of other people in the crowd singing. The person singing is singing directly to the person in the seat. There's an intimacy there that is lost on film." And I thought, well, all right, I like the theater too. Yeah, sure. And then he made the clinching argument. He said, "I'm so convinced that you are going to see the rightness of my project that I will admit to you I've already thought up the opening scene, and it's going to involve a song called 'No One Mourns the Wicked,' which of course the play does open
Right,
with 'No
it
one
does.
mourns the wicked.' And so when he said those 5 words, 'No one mourns the wicked,' he basically sealed the deal. He didn't know it for about a year because
Yeah.
we had to work out terms. But what he did in that comment was to say, "I understand why you wrote this book. I know that this book is not a parody of The Wizard of Oz. This book is about a really serious moral question about how we name our enemies in order to legitimize our taking up arms against them." And the first 5 words he uttered meant he got it. On the basis of that, I said, "Here's the contract." Eventually, I said, "Here's the contract I'll sign. I want no veto power. You need not show me the script. I would like the characters to pronounce the names correctly, so I had to teach them how to say Elphaba instead of Elphaba.
Yeah.
But other than that, I said, "Go for it. You tell the story in the way that brings its themes most vividly to life for your audience, because I've already done my work. Now it's your job."
That's great. So looking through the lens of a theater like Concord Players, can you portray someone different on, for me, portraying someone different on stage is very empowering. And it's a type of creative freedom for me. When you can become anyone you want to be, right? Can you identify with that as a writer?
Oh, I must
Like, do
identify
you
it as a
become the
writer.
character as you write?
I would say absolutely so. So much so that sometimes when I think, oh, even now I think, oh gosh, this is a knotty moral dilemma. What should I do here? Sometimes I say, what would Elphaba do? And I think that through. And then I think, wait a minute, this is quirky. This is like onanistic. You are Elphaba.
Yes.
Get in touch with your inner witch, honey, because you know who you are. But to identify with individual characters in my books, and all across the spectrum, not just the heroes, it means that there has to be some rationale for how everyone is. And you have to be able to, it has to be somewhat ambiguous too. If you'll notice, one of the things I set out to do in Wicked was to explain the possibilities for why Elphaba might be thought evil or might even do some evil actions. The one thing I didn't do was ever draw the black line at the bottom of the column and do the adding up. That is something for the reader to do about the character. It is something for the actress playing Elphaba to do. It is something for the audience to do. I am not giving you a pre-made pret-a-porter sandwich. You're going to have to do some cooking yourself if you want to work out what this is. When you are, do you act, Lisa?
Yes. Yeah.
So when you're on stage, I imagine that one of your jobs to do is to present in your character a bouquet of conundrums that that makes your character subtle, ambivalent, ambiguous, hard to pin down, for whom there can be more than one possible and contradictory thing said accurately.
Yes, because I believe it's part of the audience's responsibility to find that within the character as well. It's kind of nice giving them a little taste
Sure.
and having their own imagination pick it up from there.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a really a question I've always wanted to ask you. And out of all of the books that you've written a lot of children's books.
Right.
You've written a lot of fiction for adults. But out of all the books that you've written, do you have a favorite?
Well, again, you've got great questions today, Lisa. I really appreciate it. Makes my life so much easier when the questions are good. From a structural point of view in terms of my life, I have to say Wicked, because the financial security that it has afforded me, even before the musical came about, was such that it gave me courage to adopt my 3 children. And anybody who makes art for a living knows you better not have kids unless you can afford the Cheerios.
Exactly.
You know? So since being a family man and having a family is about the most important thing in my life, I have to say Wicked allowed that to happen. I might have gone back to teach at college or high school or grade school and had a family too, but that's the way it happened for me. That being said, I don't think it's true that every author necessarily gets better book by book by book. But I do think my last 4 or 5 books are as good as, and maybe better than, many of my earlier books. So I think I'm still learning to grow as a novelist. I mean, you have A Wild Winter Swan there. It's just a little over 200 pages. Wicked is...
I thought it would be a big
yes,
book.
right. Wicked
Yeah.
is a little over 400 pages.
Right.
And I don't think that I don't think Wicked is necessarily stronger than the other. In some ways, the shorter it is, the more confident I am in my effects, and the more confident I am that I have carried off at least some of what I was trying to do. So I like A Wild Winter Swan. I'm very happy with the book of mine called After Alice, which
I love
takes
that book.
place. Oh, thank you. Takes place on the day that Alice in Wonderland disappears down the rabbit
Yes.
hole. My children's novel, Egg and Spoon, which is optioned by Universal Studios for a major live-action original musical picture, it takes place in Russia, Tsarist Russia, in the last couple of years before the revolution. It's also a book that just gives me great joy to read and think, I couldn't have written that book for the first 35 years of my career. I needed to develop some chutzpah. And I tried, and I have.
So hopefully this last question isn't too too much, but do you feel that you have a particular author that you go to when you are in need of, I don't know, either reassurance or I tend to go to different authors when I'm stressed out, or for you, like you example, you take me off into another world. So is there an author that you go to that kind of gives you that same purpose, that same guidance?
I'm gonna give you two or three, and they're in different genres. One is I go to many poets. I read poetry in order to scramble my brains a little bit, because a poet sets your cerebral, your cognitive apprehension of the world, it sets it purposely at slant angles to what you actually see. And that, I think, is a little bit like when kindergarten teachers say, okay, everybody stand up, we're going to do jumping jacks, and gets people moving their blood, you know, after having been scribbling for an hour. I think poetry does that for me. And I have many favorite poets, Szymborska, Emily Dickinson, Keats, too many to name. There's almost, Evan Boland is a big favorite, although she just died.
Yes, that's right.
Another one, which reminds me of the ethical dimension of being the best artist one can possibly be, is E.M. Forster. Even though his works are old-fashioned, I like his conversational style with the reader. I like how he sometimes will begin, he'll begin a book with the phrase, this isn't exact, but, we might as well begin with the house, he'll say.
Yeah.
And you just feel immediately like leaning in and saying, oh, tell me about the house. What is it about the house? Finally, for finesse and completion and coherence of genius vision, I am always nourished by the children's books of Maurice Sendak. Now, Maurice Sendak was a good friend of mine, but if I'm downhearted, I can sometimes take Where the Wild Things Are, or We Are All in the Dumps with Jack and Guy, or some of the pictures he did for novels. I have almost a complete collection of everything he ever illustrated for or wrote himself, and spend a little time with them, and I am reminded how he gave his 65 years of his professional life to the art of bookmaking, and how he never stinted, and he always pushed through to try to find out the thing that he really needed to say. His trust in his own vision and his own talent, which is much vaster than mine, is nonetheless a trust that can be emulated, and I try to do my best by him, in his name, in a way.
You certainly have, I think. Well, thank you so much, Gregory. And to the audience at home, we thank you so much for joining today. Please make sure you run straight to the bookstore, in particular maybe Concord Bookstore, and buy a copy of this great book, A Wild Winter Swan by Gregory Maguire. And thank you so much to Gregory for helping us celebrate the Concord Players 100th anniversary this year. So
and
thank
happy
you so much.
birthday to you.
Thank you.
Who can say if I've been changed for the better, but because I knew you,
Because I knew you,
I have been changed for good. And just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for the things I've done you blame me for.
but then I guess we know there's blame to share,
And none of it seems to matter anymore.
like a comet pulled
Like a ship
orbit
from
as
its
it passes a
by the
sun.
wind of
Like a stream that meets
like
a
a seed dropped by a
halfway
bird in
through
the wood.
wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better?
I do believe I